I'm Larry Mendte. Welcome to Another Thing. There are terrorists in our midst. The FBI recently reported that there are terrorist cells in all 50 states and a larger number working in our area, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, than in the rest of the country. That's our lead topic today, as law enforcement weighs the risks and benefits of surveillance versus just moving in and making arrests. Ellen Kolodziej begins our coverage now in Philadelphia. Ellen.
Thank you, Larry. Well, for the first time ever, the head of the FBI says that ISIS has its tentacles in every state in the U.S., even Hawaii and now Alaska. One professor here at Salle University who speaks about terrorism around the world says this is serious, but there is no need for Americans to panic.
Troubled soul, come to the caliphate, right? You will live a life of glory. These are the apocalyptic end times. You will find a life of meaning here fighting for our so-called caliphate. And if you can't come, kill somebody where you are.
FBI Director James Comey says ISIS uses this kind of message on social media to recruit young Americans in all 50 states. And he wants everyone to be on the lookout for anything suspicious wherever you live.
I tell my state and local partners, this is about all of us being connected tightly to each other. This isn't a New York phenomenon or a Washington phenomenon. This is all 50 states, and in ways that are very hard to see, right? Because it's highly unlikely that it's going to be a federal agent who will first see or hear about someone acting in strange ways on social media.
ISIS does want American operatives. American operatives are valuable to them because they want people who are able to strike U.S. targets. And getting someone in from Syria or Iraq who is a foreign national is more likely to be caught by intelligence and law enforcement officials than someone already in the country.
Michael Boyle is a political science professor at Salle University who travels the globe speaking about terrorism. He says he's not surprised ISIS has some presence in all 50 states. He just doesn't believe there are cells planning imminent attacks.
It's important not to overstate the threat. You are still more likely to be killed by a lot of other natural disasters or, for example, heart attacks and things like that, car accidents, than you are by terrorism. And to some extent, fear is what they want. And so if you give in to the fear, you're essentially allowing ISIS to be successful.
So this new report on ISIS will most definitely be a hot topic among the presidential candidates, especially once both parties officially have their nominee. Reporting for Another Thing, I'm Ellen Kolodziej.
All right, thank you, Ellen. Now to continue our conversation about terrorists in our midst is John Comiske, who is assistant professor of criminal justice at Monmouth University and a retired New York City police lieutenant. Sir, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for being here.
A pretty obvious question that I think would be on a lot of people's minds when they hear an FBI report that says that there are terrorist cells in every state and that New Jersey and New York especially has been a hotbed of this. Why doesn't the FBI or local law enforcement just move in and either disrupt or arrest these cells?
Okay, so big picture, if there's an immediate threat to the public, they're going to move in. In many cases, a terrorist case or a criminal case, and they can overlap or they can actually start as a criminal case, which is often the situation. We want to see who else is involved. Once we move in, we may scare off co-conspirators or what might actually be a bigger threat. So we want to make sure that we're thorough in what we do. And get all the involved parties. We don't want to lose half the parties. We don't want to afford those other parties an opportunity to escape.
Isn't that kind of a dangerous game of chicken with public safety in that you're allowing them to continue their operations and then hoping that you'll catch them before they do something nefarious?
There's always a risk involved. It's a calculated risk. Again, if there's that imminent threat, we're going to move in. But yeah, certainly there is a risk that people will escape. The people that you are monitoring, that you are surveilling, you will afford them the opportunity to escape.
But there must be a reason you take that risk. So some of these type of investigations have been fruitful in the past?
The vast majority have, and certainly there's control mechanisms. The greater the threat, the more people we're going to have. So if we know we're going to arrest someone and we want to see what else is going to be involved, we're watching them 24/7. We're not going to afford them that opportunity to escape.
You've had some cases where people did escape. The most famous case, of course, is the Paris attacks, where they had people under surveillance in Belgium, in Germany, and in France, and they talked about them just falling off the grid. That means somehow they were able to escape law enforcement surveillance. You would think that in that case that they were surveilling them, and then somehow they were able to elude that. That's always a risk.
Well, you know, look at the scope of what we're doing on a national level and international level. Sometimes you're talking about 1,000 people. Sometimes you're talking about multiple plots. And some people, they come to you in passing. This is a person of interest. Okay, this is someone we should look at. And we do take an initial look. And there's no criminality or there's no immediate threat. But we record their names. We keep them in our books. This is somebody we may want to connect to something at a later time. And they do fall off the grid.
Do you think that the terrorist organizations are onto you in that respect, in that they're hoping and they're trying to inspire lone wolves so they don't have these cells that could be surveilled?
Oh, they're absolutely trying to inspire lone wolves. This was certainly Al-Qaeda's MO, modus operandi, post 9/11. They realized they really couldn't do the super attacks, the 9/11. So certainly the idea of leaderless resistance or leaderless jihad. If you're a good Muslim, this is what you should do, and you don't need instructions from us. Think about it on your own. You get together with your own people or yourself and do harm as a good Muslim. So that plays to both Al-Qaeda and ISIS.
Because they don't want the communication. They don't want the organization because that's their Achilles heel when it comes to law enforcement. That's what you hope for, right?
Correct.
And so some of the most successful attacks recently in this country, for instance, Fort Hood, although I guess there was some communication in there, San Bernardino, there was very little communication. I guess there were some signs, but there were very little communication. Correct.
You get a person like Anwar al-Awlaki, and he was a super terrorist, if you will. He was charismatic. He talked about jihad as being as American as apple pie. He was able to reach a good number of people through social media, and a good number of people took his message, which was to do leaderless jihad, to not be connected to any organization, not be detectable.
You know, in a little bit, we're going to go up and we're going to leave the studio here and go up to talk to some Muslim American advocacy groups. Most of the cases we just talked about, we've only talked about a couple of examples, have been Muslims. Is it difficult with law enforcement when you're dealing with these cases not to stereotype, not to fall into that trap of just looking for Muslim Americans?
Our goal is to follow the threat wherever it goes, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim. At least half of the terrorist attacks post 9/11 in the U.S. have been non-Muslim.
Is that right?
Yes. Whether it's 48 have been non-Muslims, sovereign citizens, neo-Nazis, and 45. Sorry, of the people killed in the U.S. Post 9/11, 45 of them have been killed by what we would call some kind of Islamic fundamentalist. 48 would be from non-Muslims.
Now, what would you consider a terrorist attack? Because some of these, I don't think, or we all know about them? Are we all privy to them?
That's a great question when you try to define what terrorism is, and what the Obama administration has used the term homegrown violent extremist. Fort Hood, some people would consider to be terrorism. I would consider it to be terrorism. Others have considered it to be workplace violence. So there's some nomenclature issues there as well.
Let me wrap up with a final question, because when we talk about that, it raises fears. How concerned should we be in this country about the threat of terrorism?
We should be aware of it. We should go about our normal lives. If we see something, say something. And I know we repeat that message. What that seemingly innocuous behavior, somebody leaving that bag, or and certainly with any kind of radicalization piece. If you see someone essentially in your family, in your faith-based group, in your workplace, where they're acting irrational and espousing violence, well, say something. Make a call. You know, it might be a mental health issue. It may be, or it may be something worse than that. But when we say, if you see something, say something, we really do mean that. And in many cases, we find out afterwards that had people said something, there could have been an intervention.
I guess what I'm asking is, are we being irrational in our fears?
Theoretically, yes. I mean, the threat of you're more likely to be killed in a car accident or in a violent mugging than any kind of terrorism. By the numbers, yes. But we want to feel safe in our home. The idea of homeland security, the idea of security is we want to be secure from terrorism. So as a person, as a father, as a citizen, I'm concerned about it, but I'm not over concerned. I'm going to go about my business.
Professor, thank you so much. Lieutenant, John Comiske, Assistant Professor of Criminal Justice, Monmouth University, and retired New York City police officer. As I said just a moment ago, we are going to continue our conversation out of studio with some Muslim Americans, an advocacy group for Muslim Americans who are concerned when their religion is constantly linked to terrorism. When Another Thing continues.